The golden sun of the ancient world once cast its long amber glow over a landscape of such breathtaking beauty that it seemed the very breath of the Creator had lingered there. In the heart of the Jordan Valley, nestled amidst a verdant tapestry of emerald fields and shimmering waters, lay the cities of the plain. To the weary traveler emerging from the harsh, bone-dry deserts of the east, this valley did not merely look like land, it looked like a dream, a paradise regained, where the soil was so fertile it practically groaned under the weight of its own abundance. But beneath the surface of this glittering prosperity, a spiritual rot was festering. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is not merely a chronicle of fire and brimstone, it is an epic saga of the human heart's capacity for both towering pride and desperate redemption. It begins not with destruction, but with a wandering people and a choice that would echo through eternity. Centuries before the fire fell, the earth was unified by a single tongue. On the plains of Shinar, humanity had been gripped by a fever of ambition. "Let us build a tower that reaches the heavens," they cried, their voices thick with the intoxication of their own potential. They sought to storm the gates of the divine, to carve their names into the firmament so they might never be forgotten. But the Almighty looked upon their arrogance and with a silent command fractured their reality. Imagine the scene of absolute pandemonium. A mason reaches for a brick, calling out a simple request to his brother, only to hear a sequence of rhythmic, alien sounds tumble from his own lips. Panic rippled through the construction site like a physical blow. Fathers looked into the eyes of their sons and saw only the terrifying blankness of incomprehension. The great Tower of Babel, once a monument to human unity, became a tomb of silence and confusion. The people scattered, driven by the winds of their new, isolated languages, wandering the earth as strangers to one another. Among these displaced souls were those who eventually crested the ridge overlooking the Jordan Valley. After months of trekking through salt-cracked wastes and burying their dead in shallow, sandy graves, the sight of the valley was overwhelming. It was a lush, vibrant corridor where the River Jordan snaked like a silver ribbon through groves of date palms and fields of wild grain. "Here," they whispered in their various tongues, "we shall finally rest." Generations passed, and the tents of the nomads transformed into the formidable stone and mud brick ramparts of 5 great cities: Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. These were not mere settlements, they were the jewels of the ancient world. Sodom, the largest, was a marvel of engineering. Its walls were 5 meters thick, designed to withstand any siege, and its internal plumbing channeled both warm and cold springs directly into the opulent villas of the ruling class. King Bera looked out from his 4-story palace and saw a kingdom that knew no hunger. With 3 harvests every single year, the storehouses were perpetually overflowing. Gomorrah, led by King Birsha, was the pulsing heart of the world's commerce. Its markets were a riot of color and scent, spices from the Orient, fine linens from Egypt, and silver from the far reaches of the north. Every road in the valley seemed to terminate at its massive gates. Life was easy, and in that ease, the people grew cold. Wealth, when divorced from gratitude, creates a dangerous vacuum in the soul. The inhabitants of the plain began to believe the lie that they were the masters of their own fate. They walked their streets with a swaggering indifference to the heavens. The ancient laws of hospitality, once the sacred bond of the desert, were systematically dismantled. When the destitute knocked on the heavy cedar doors of the wealthy, they were met with jeers or chilling silence. The widow and the orphan became invisible, ghosts haunting the margins of a society obsessed with its own pleasure. As the years rolled on, the moral fabric of the cities unraveled completely. Darkness was called light, cruelty was rebranded as strength. The cries of the oppressed, those cheated in the markets, those abused in the shadows, those forgotten in their hunger, began to rise from the valley. It was a low, constant thrum of agony that eventually pierced the veil of the celestial realms. Meanwhile, in the quiet hill country of Hebron, a different kind of life was being lived. Abraham, the patriarch of faith, dwelt in the simplicity of his tents near the great oaks of Mamre. Beside him for many years had been his nephew, Lot. They had traveled together from Ur through Haran and into the land of promise. Their wealth in livestock had become so vast that the land could no longer sustain their combined households. With a heart of extraordinary selflessness, Abraham had given Lot the first choice of the land. Lot, standing on a high ridge, looked toward the shimmering green expanse of the Jordan Valley. He saw the wealth of Sodom and forgot the warnings of his upbringing. He chose the valley. At first, he merely pitched his tent toward Sodom, keeping a safe distance from its notoriety. But the pull of the city is a subtle thing. A few months later, his tents were closer. A year later, he was at the gates. Eventually, Lot, the nephew of the man of God, was a resident of the city itself, his soul daily vexed by the wickedness he witnessed, yet unable to tear himself away from the comfort it provided. One blistering afternoon, as the heat shimmered over the hills of Hebron, 3 travelers appeared on the horizon. Abraham, even in his old age, possessed a spirit of hospitality that put the great kings of the valley to shame. He did not wait for them to approach. He ran to meet them. He bowed low, his face in the dust, and begged them to rest. He did not know he was entertaining the divine. With frantic energy, Abraham commanded Sarah to bake fresh bread from the finest flour. He personally selected a tender calf for the meal. He stood by them under the shade of the oaks, serving them with the reverence one might show a king. It was here, amidst the smell of roasting meat and the rustle of leaves, that the Lord revealed the impossible, that Sarah, at 90 years old, would bear a son. Sarah's laugh from within the tent was the sound of human doubt meeting divine certainty. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" the visitor asked, a question that would echo through the ages. But as the visitors rose to leave, their gaze shifted. They looked down toward the valley, toward the smog and the sin of Sodom. The Lord spoke with a gravity that made the very air feel heavy. The outcry against the cities had become unbearable. The investigation was at hand. Abraham's heart seized with terror. He knew his nephew was down there. He knew the character of the people who lived within those thick walls. He stepped forward, his voice trembling but bold, embarking on the most daring negotiation in human history. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" he pleaded. "What if there are 50 righteous people there? Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is right?" The Lord's response was a testament to his staggering patience. "If I find 50, I will spare the whole place." Abraham pressed on, his humility deepening with every breath. 45, 40, 30, 20? Finally, he reached the lowest number he dared. "What if only 10 are found there? For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, 2 of the visitors, angels in the guise of men, descended into the valley. They found Lot sitting at the gate of Sodom. Though the city had stained him, the core of his uncle's teachings remained. He saw the strangers, and knowing the predatory nature of his neighbors, insisted they take refuge in his home. "No," the angels replied, testing the city's character. "We will sleep in the town square." Lot's face paled. He knew the square was a place of no return for a stranger. He compelled them with such desperation that they finally relented. But the peace of his home was short-lived. Before the night could settle, the sound of 1,000 footsteps filled the street. It was the sound of a mob, not of a few criminals, but of the men of the city, both young and old, from every quarter. They surrounded the house, their voice a discordant howl of malice. "Bring them out!" they screamed, their intentions dark and depraved. Lot stepped outside, closing the door behind him to protect his guests.
He tried to reason with them, offering even his own family in a desperate, misguided attempt to uphold the law of hospitality. But the mob only grew more feral. "Stand back," they roared. "This foreigner dares to judge us. We will treat you worse than them." Just as the crowd surged forward to shatter the door, the angels reached out. With supernatural strength, they yanked Lot back into the safety of the hallway. A sudden, blinding flash of celestial light erupted from the doorway, striking the mob with a terrifying, disorienting blindness. Outside, the men of Sodom groped at the air, cursing and stumbling, unable to even find the handle of the door they had been pounding on seconds earlier. The verdict was sealed. There were not 10 righteous men in Sodom. There was only one family, clinging to the edge of a crumbling world. "Get your family out," the angels commanded, their voices now ringing with the urgency of a trumpet blast.